Welcome to Restoria, your cozy corner for gentle bedtime stories. My name is James and I'll be your host tonight. Every night, we bring you peaceful tales designed to calm your mind and help you drift off into a deep, restful sleep. So snuggle in, close your eyes, and let the story begin. The story tonight is called The Sleep Merchant. Chapter 1. When the nights turned restless. The village of Larkspur Hollow had always been a quiet place. Nestled between rolling hills and slow rivers, it was the sort of village where the sunsets took their time, and children fell asleep to the sound of owls rather than the buzz of street lamps. But lately, something had changed. It began subtly. A child who couldn't settle under her covers. A farmer waking long before the rooster crowed, unsure why his heart was thudding like he'd been chased through his dreams. The baker's hands trembled as he kneaded his morning bread, not from age or effort, but from weariness that no nap could fix. By the end of the week, the whole village seemed to move more slowly, shadows under their eyes growing longer even as the days grew shorter. No one could say exactly what was wrong. There was no illness, no loud noise or foul smell in the air, but dreams had become elusive things slipping away like smoke when grasped. On the 7th night of restless sleep, the fog rolled in. It wasn't an unusual fog soft, silver, clinging to the cobbled streets, but it carried with it a hush, as though even the wind didn't want to disturb the stillness. That was when Corillo arrived. His wagon did not clatter. Its wheels whispered along the road like whispers on silk. Lanterns hung from its corners, their light not golden or harsh, but silver blue and gentle, like starlight passed through frost. He came with no announcement, no heralds or bells. One moment, the village square was empty. The next, his wagon was simply there, tucked beside the fountain that hadn't run in days. No one saw him arrive, but the children swore they smelled pine and sweet rain drifting through their shutters. Corillo himself was as curious as the wares he carried. Tall and soft-footed, he wore layers of clothing, the color of cloud-soft grays and moon-white sand, a hat with a wide brim that shaded his eyes. He never seemed to speak unless someone truly needed him to. But when he did, his voice was a calm tide, washing gently over the rocks of worry. That first night, he simply set up his wagon. He lit a lantern and hung it high. It looked like a star had floated down and chosen to rest there. In the morning, no one mentioned the wagon. It wasn't out of rudeness or fear. It simply felt natural, as though it had always been there, waiting. But people did notice little changes. A small jar of what looked like dew sat on the midwife's windowsill, labeled with a silver ribbon, Night Whisper Mist. She tried it that evening and slept so soundly she forgot to worry about her aching knees. A pair of hand-stitched slippers appeared beside the innkeeper's bed. When she wore them, she realized she could walk without the floorboards creaking for the first time in years. The blacksmith found a tiny wooden box in his forge, oddly untouched by soot. When opened, it played a lullaby so tender that his gruff heart softened, and for once, he fell asleep before midnight. Children whispered about a man with starlit eyes who waved at them from alleys, then vanished before they could wave back. One girl swore she saw a moth land on her pillow and turn into a miniature pillow itself, feathered and glowing. Bit by bit, the village of Larkspur Hollow began to shift. Not quickly, not loudly, but like a deep breath slowly let out after being held too long. And through it all, Carrillo moved like moonlight seen only when looked for, felt more often than found. No one yet understood what he was doing, but they all began to sleep a little easier, and for the first time in many nights, dreams returned, soft ones, gentle ones, like boats drifting on quiet water. The sleep merchant had come, and rest was on its way. Chapter 2: Whispers Beneath the Window. In the days that followed Carrillo's arrival, the village of Larkspur Hollow began to shift in curious and comforting ways. It was subtle, like the first warmth of spring beneath a stubborn frost, but undeniably there. No one had yet spoken to Carrillo directly, yet every home seemed to feel his presence. It began with whispers, quiet murmurs passed over tea, behind knitting needles, and between yawns too deep to ignore.
"Did you see that glowing jar by the well?"
My little one slept through the night for the first time in weeks. There was music playing, I swear, but no one was there. Carrillo never knocked. He never asked for coin or thanks. He simply left what was needed where it was needed. One cloudy afternoon, Mira, the seamstress, sat by her window, her fingers idle over an unfinished hem. Her eyes, always alert, had grown heavy-lidded with days of poor sleep. But she couldn't lie down. She couldn't stop thinking about overdue orders, her aching fingers, the strange silence between her and her grown son, who'd stopped writing letters. As the sky turned from pearl to pewter, she heard it. A faint humming, not from outside, but from just beneath her window. It was a lullaby, wordless and slow, like the rocking of a cradle in deep time. Mira stood and peered through the panes. No one, only the cobbled street and a single stone with a moon carved into its surface, resting against the sill. She opened the window and took the stone into her hand. It was warm, not hot, not magical with sparks, just warm in a way that felt alive. She held it to her heart, and without understanding why, her knees folded gently beneath her, and she curled into sleep right there on the window seat. That same evening, Tomas, the miller, who hadn't had a full night's rest since his wife passed 3 winters ago, found a tiny envelope tucked into his coat pocket. Inside was a slip of parchment that read, "Tonight, take tea with honey. Sit in your wife's chair, read aloud, even if only to the air." He blinked, then blinked again, but no one was near. The handwriting was delicate, looping like falling leaves. That night, Tomas did as the note advised. He brewed tea, too much honey as usual, and sat in the empty chair by the fireplace. He opened an old book of poems and began to read aloud, stumbling over the words at first, but slowly the syllables soothed him. The room felt fuller, not crowded, not haunted, just accompanied. He fell asleep in that chair, the book resting on his chest, and for the first time in many years, he dreamed of dancing. Children were the first to grow bold. They left little gifts on the steps of Carrillo's wagon. Wild flowers, acorns with faces drawn on them, tiny folded notes that said things like, "Thank you for the stars," and "I like your glowing wheels." Carrillo never replied in words, but their gifts would vanish, and the next morning, they'd find something waiting. A ribbon that shimmered like dusk, a feather that glowed faintly in the dark, or a string of tiny paper lanterns that flickered even without flame. One evening, as dusk spilled purple across the rooftops, a boy named Eli couldn't sleep. He had tried everything: hot milk, soft songs, counting sheep that kept leaping too fast. His mind buzzed with questions he was too young to name. So he crept from his bed, down the stairs, and outside into the night. The village was quiet, wrapped in soft shadows. Carrillo's wagon stood in the square, gently glowing. As Eli approached, the back of the wagon opened on its own. Inside, it wasn't dark. It wasn't cramped. It was endless, like walking into a sky made of shelves and cushions and stars in jars. Soft music, like wind through pine trees, filled the air. Carrillo sat in the middle of it all, legs folded, a teacup steaming gently in his hand. He looked up and smiled, not in surprise, not in judgment, just welcome. Eli sat beside him without a word. Carrillo poured him a cup of something that smelled like warm rain. Together, they sat, sipping slowly. Then Carrillo spoke, just one line. Sometimes, the mind just wants company before it can rest. Eli didn't respond, but his shoulders softened. His eyelids drooped. Carrillo handed him a pillow that shimmered faintly, like moonlight on water. Eli curled up on the soft rug beneath the shelves, and within minutes, sleep took him like a tide. In the morning, Eli awoke in his bed, the shimmering pillow under his head. No one knew how he got there, but he smiled all day, and that night, his sleep came easily. The whispers continued. The village began to slow. Dreams returned, soft and steady. And still, Carrillo stayed, never asking, only offering. The sleep merchant was at work, and the night was healing. Chapter 3: The Clockmaker's Silence. On the far edge of Larkspur Hollow, where the cobbled roads softened into moss-covered paths, lived a man named Alric, the village clockmaker. His little shop was built into the side of a hill, round and warm, like the ticking hearts of the clocks he kept. Every hour, the gentle chimes of his handmade creations would echo faintly across the village, like polite reminders that time was still flowing. But lately, those chimes had grown faint. Some even stopped altogether. Alric had not been seen in the square. His shutters stayed closed, his windows dark. No one had wanted to disturb him. He was a private man, and people respected his silences. Yet many wondered if he, too, had fallen victim to the sleeplessness haunting the hollow. Corrillo knew. That morning, just before the sky turned from navy to rose, he walked the soft path to Alric's door. His wagon remained behind, lanterns dimming in the mist. In his hands, he carried nothing visible, just his presence. He knocked once. The sound was more a suggestion than a summons. After a moment, the door creaked open. Not wide, not welcoming, just enough to show a sliver of Alric's weary face. "I'm not in the mood for company," he said, voice rough with unspoken things. Corrillo only nodded, then extended his hand, palm open. There, resting in his fingers, was a key, but not an ordinary one. It was crafted from moonstone and aged brass, shaped like no lock anyone had seen. Alric stared at it. "I don't understand." "You will," Corrillo murmured. "When the ticking feels too loud or too quiet." And then he was gone. Alric closed the door and locked it, the key still cold in his palm. That evening, as shadows danced against his shutters and the clocks sat silent on their shelves, he felt something stir inside. A memory, maybe. A loneliness he'd mistaken for calm. He took the key and wandered to his workshop. At the back wall was an old cabinet, untouched for years. He didn't know why, but his hand moved to unlock it. The key turned without resistance. Inside were pieces of a clock he had once tried to build for his wife before she passed. It was meant to mark not just time, but memory-age tick infused with a note from their favorite song. Each hour a bell that echoed like her laughter. He had never finished it. The sorrow had been too thick. Now, though, the pieces shimmered faintly, as if some invisible dust had been swept away. Alric worked in silence. Outside, Corrillo sat beneath an old yew tree, sipping from a cup that always seemed to steam just right. He didn't watch the windows. He didn't need to. The village had a rhythm of its own now, soft and slow. That night, the villagers noticed something strange. At exactly midnight, a new chime rang out. Different from the others lower, more musical, with a hum that seemed to settle into the bones like a lullaby. They didn't know it came from Alric's house, but everyone who heard it that night slept better than they had in years. And Alric, he finished the clock. He didn't hang it. He didn't need to. It simply stood on his workbench, gently pulsing in time with his breath. That night, he fell asleep in his chair, smiling. Back in the square, children noticed that Corrillo's wagon had changed. New drawers appeared on its sides. One had a handle shaped like a crescent moon, another like a sleeping fox. No one saw him crafting them, yet there they were, filled with fresh Dreamfeathers and jars labeled with names like Stillness, Gentle Fade, and Memory Light. Larkspur Hollow grew quieter, but not in a lonely way. In a peaceful way, yawns became contagious. Laughter softened. Even the animals seemed calmer. Cats curled up sooner. Dogs barked less at shadows. One boy, curious as ever, asked his grandmother, "Why does the wagon look like it's breathing?" She smiled and replied, "Because maybe it is. Maybe it's dreaming, too." Carrillo, as always, said nothing. But that night, he left a dream feather on the boy's pillow. It fluttered once in the candlelight, then went still. The clockmaker slept. The village sighed. And somewhere between stars and silence, Carrillo watched, his presence a hush beneath the world's noise. The sleep merchant was still here, and the heart of the village beat slower, steadier, in time with dreams. Chapter 4: The Sleepless Child. Near the willow grove, at the bend in the river, where reeds whispered secrets to the wind, lived a girl named Nessa. She was 8, small and serious, with wide eyes that rarely blinked and hair the color of tree bark after rain. Unlike the other children of Larkspur Hollow, Nessa had not yet felt the touch of the sleep merchant's magic. While others drifted off to sleep beneath glowing feathers or hummed lullabies from invisible music boxes, Nessa remained restless. Her parents had tried everything: soothing teas, soft toys, whispered stories, even a dream feather tucked under her pillow. But her mind was too busy. Every night, it leapt from thought to thought, chasing shadows and stars alike. "Why do dreams go away when we wake up?" she'd ask. "Where do the stars go during the day? What happens to wishes that never come true?" Her mother would kiss her forehead and say, "Sleep, my love. The answers will wait." But sleep did not come. Not fully. And when it did, it never stayed. Carrillo noticed. He passed her house each evening, his footsteps silent, his lanterns casting soft halos of starlight. One night, as the moon rose in full, he paused beneath her window. He could hear her voice inside, reading a story aloud, not for anyone else, just to keep her thoughts steady. He reached into one of his hidden drawers and withdrew something he had not used in a very long time: a dream shell. It looked like a simple spiral shell, the size of a plum, pale lavender with streaks of silver, but inside, it held one perfect dream, the kind meant not for distraction, but for listening. He left it on the windowsill. When Nessa found it the next morning, she picked it up with caution, then curiosity. She held it to her ear like she'd once done with a seashell, and there, softly, came a voice, not quite a voice, more a feeling shaped into words. "Close your eyes, not to sleep, but to see." That night, she did just that. The moment her eyes shut, the dream shell warmed in her hands. She saw not a story, but a world, a place of floating meadows and whispering winds, where questions hung in the air like fireflies and were answered not with words, but feelings. In this dream, Nessa wandered barefoot across silver grass. She met a fox with stars on its fur, who didn't speak but showed her how to listen to the hush between heartbeats. She met a girl who looked just like her, sitting beside a stream, skipping stones that glowed with tiny memories, moments she thought forgotten, like the time her mother braided her hair by firelight or when she first learned to whistle. Each stone whispered, "You are safe. You are seen." When she woke, morning light poured through the window, and for the first time in many moons, Nessa had slept deeply. She blinked up at the ceiling, the dream shell still in her hands, now cool and quiet. She didn't speak right away. She just smiled, a soft, secret smile that made her mother pause and hold her a little longer. From that day on, Nessa was quieter, but not withdrawn. Thoughtful, not heavy. She still asked questions, but now she also waited for the hush between them. She carried the dream shell in her pocket everywhere she went, and though it never spoke again, it shimmered faintly when she touched it, like it remembered. Corrillo, watching from afar, allowed himself a brief, satisfied breath. He placed another dream shell in the bottom drawer of his wagon just in case another child might need it someday. That night, the willow trees seemed to sway slower, more rhythmically, and the wind along the river hummed a tune that no one could name but everyone understood. The sleep merchant's lanterns flickered brighter, and Larkspur Hollow slept a little deeper, its dreams rich with foxes and stars, and the warmth of questions answered in silence. Chapter 5. The Lantern in the Fog. As the moon waned and the leaves began to rustle with a cooler breeze, a pale mist began to drift more often through Larkspur Hollow. It was not the thick, chilling fog of storms or sorrow, but a soft veil, like the breath of a dream not quite remembered. The villagers walked more slowly in it. They whispered more kindly. Corrillo's wagon, always glowing gently in the square, seemed to grow even softer, more ethereal. Its lanterns pulsed faintly, like fireflies behind frosted glass, casting dreamy patterns that danced over stones and walls. But one night, as the fog rolled in thicker than before, the lanterns dimmed. Only one remained lit, a single hanging light at the wagon's front, glowing with a faint golden hue different from the usual starry silver. It flickered gently, as if waiting. That same night, Mara the healer sat alone in her cottage, staring at an untouched cup of tea. She was well respected, steady-handed, always knowing what root to steep or what herb to press beneath the tongue. But lately, she'd begun to feel hollow. Not tired like the others had been, not restless, just faded. Like a book with its ink washed away. She had not dreamed in months. Even before the sleeplessness had settled over the village, she'd known something inside her had begun to quiet in a way that was not peace. She helped others rest, but she herself floated through the days like mist never quite here. When the golden lantern appeared, Mara saw it from her window. It wasn't bright, it didn't call out, but something in her stirred. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and followed its light. The village square was empty, silent but not lonely. Corrillo stood beside the lantern, his expression calm as always. "I haven't seen gold light before," Mara said. He nodded. "Gold is for those who forget how to feel safe in stillness." She hesitated. "And you think I've forgotten?" Corrillo didn't answer with words. He opened the side of the wagon and stepped inside. Mara followed. Within, The space shimmered as before soft shelves, warm cushions, strange and wonderful items glowing gently. But tonight, the center of the room held something new, a chair woven from moonbark and dreamvine, positioned beside a wide, shallow basin filled with water that reflected no ceiling, only stars. Corillo gestured for her to sit. He handed her a small teacup that smelled of rosemary and memory. She sipped, and the fog outside thickened, wrapping the wagon in silence. "Look," Corillo said. Mara gazed into the basin. The water rippled, then settled. And there, she saw a vision, not a dream, not a memory, but something between. It was herself, years ago, holding a child's hand as she taught them how to bind a sprig of mint. A friend laughing beside her on a summer walk. A lonely winter night when she had lit every candle in the house just to feel the light. All the moments she had tended to others, pouring out warmth, but never refilling her own well. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from recognition. When the basin faded to stillness, Corillo handed her a small lantern of her own. It was golden, like the one outside, but smaller just right for her palm. "This will glow only when you need it," he said. "Not when you are lost, only when you are empty. It will remind you to come home." She held it close. It was light as a feather, warm as a heartbeat. That night, Mara slept beside the wagon, wrapped in a blanket that felt like a memory of being held. Her dreams came quietly, like gentle waves lapping at shores she hadn't visited in a long time. In the morning, the fog lifted early. The villagers awoke refreshed. Mara returned to her cottage, the lantern now resting on her windowsill, faintly glowing even in daylight. That day, her laughter returned, quiet at first, then bright as birdsong. And Corillo's golden lantern? It had faded. Its work was done. The village breathed in harmony, its people wrapped in rest, like a lullaby that lingered long after the last note. And Corillo's wagon, always quiet, glowed a little softer. The fog around it thinned. His work was nearly done. One more night remained. One more chapter to unfold in dreams. Chapter 6. The Quiet Farewell. The stars above Larkspur Hollow twinkled with an extra softness that final night. The village had grown hushed, not out of weariness, but comfort, like a blanket drawn up to the chin just before drifting off. Yawns were shared like greetings, and the wind seemed to hum lullabies no one had taught it. Corillo stood by his wagon, quietly securing drawers and whispering to his lanterns. They dimmed in turn, one by one, like sleepy eyes closing. His work here, it seemed, had found its end. He walked the cobbled streets one last time. At Mira, the seamstress's window, he paused to see her curled beneath a quilt she hadn't finished sewing, her face serene. He tucked a single thread of Dreamfeather into her sewing basket. Outside Thomas, the miller's cottage, He left a book of poems with no title, only blank pages that would slowly fill themselves each time he read them aloud. Past the willow grove, he found Nessa's windowsill open just a crack. The dream shell still lay by her bed, quiet but glimmering faintly. He added a second shell beside it, this one in the shape of a tiny fox, curled in sleep. Near the edge of the village, in Alric the clockmaker's shop, the new chime continued to ring gentle, steady, healing. Corilo smiled. A piece of moonstone now sat at the heart of the dream clock, pulsing faintly with each beat. And finally, at Mara the healer's cottage, the golden lantern still glowed on the windowsill. Inside, she sat with a cup of tea, watching it, her eyes kind. She saw him pass and lifted her cup in silent thanks. Corilo nodded. At dawn, long before the sun truly rose, the wagon stirred. It did not rattle or roll. It simply began to move, wheels whispering across stone, guided by nothing visible. The lanterns glowed pale silver again, the Dreamfeathers tucked gently into place, the drawers sealed and sleeping. At the center of the village stood an old tree-doll, wide, with bark that had seen generations. As the wagon passed it, Corilo stepped down for the last time. He removed a tiny carving knife from his coat and etched a single phrase into the trunk. "Rest well. I'll be nearby." Then he placed a single moon petal at the tree's roots, brushed his hand across the bark, and returned to his wagon. Children who woke early claimed they saw the wagon roll down the path into the mist, its lights blinking like distant stars. Others said they dreamed of it leaving, wheels turning silently beneath skies of velvet blue. No one heard it go, but everyone felt the space it left behind, the kind of space that doesn't feel empty, only full of something invisible and kind. That evening, as the first night without Corilo arrived, the village felt different, yet whole. They still had their blankets, their lullabies, their little jars of mist and slippers without sound. But more importantly, they had found something deeper. They had found the rhythm of stillness, the hush between thoughts, the warmth of sleep. And though Corilo was gone, his presence lingered in moonlight touching windows, in quiet dreams of silver wagons, and in the peace that wrapped the hollow like a final verse of a well-loved song. Somewhere, on another starlit path far from Larkspur Hollow, the sleep merchant traveled on. His lanterns glowed gently, his wagon whispered along forgotten roads, and he listened for the next place where dreams had gone missing. Because somewhere, there was always a village in need of rest, and Corilo would be there, in time, softly, silently, like a dream arriving just before sleep.